Hey listener fan thingies, this is Darwin from Darwin's Deviations, and, what was the line again?
Oh no!
You ruined it!
What kind of a man are you? You can't even make a short clip.
Shut up!
Darwin, why are we even doing this?
Because we're desperate! You're listening to Pods Like Us!
What is their show even like?
I don't know. Does anybody even listen to them? We all just want to mooch off the free marketing, but...
I hope I don't regret associating with them.
No worries, Darwin. They'll be the ones regretting it.
Pods Like Us won't let me cuss, but if you want profanity, check out my depravity!
Darwin, that sucked!
Shut up!
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm talking with the incredibly talented host and creator of The Night's End, Mr. James Barnett, otherwise known as Jimmy Horrors. Hey Jimmy, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
Doing fine, thanks very much. Thanks for chatting with me today.
No worries. Glad to be here.
So am I. So, how were you first introduced to podcasting then, Jimmy?
It's sort of been a bit of a recent thing for me. I'm well behind the times with podcasting. Probably going back only a couple of years, maybe. I had a really long commute and I sort of had to go across the city from the east to the west in my state in Australia. And so the drive, it would take on a good day an hour and a half. But as we know, traffic is bad. There's too many people. So, yeah, often it would take me 2.5 hours to drive to work. And so it's quite an amount of time to be driving. So I sort of was looking for something to keep myself entertained, and I love music. So I started off with music and you're just getting right into that. But then I realized that I wasn't reading as much anymore. And as a writer, we all know that if you don't read, that's a bit of a big no-no. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll move to audiobooks. So I sort of moved onto audiobooks. But after a while, I found that a bit tiring, just the same voice, like for 17 hours, sort of. So I moved on. So then a lot of people at my workplace were talking about podcasts and this sort of thing. And I actually stumbled across the app on my iPhone, and I actually thought for the longest time that I had to pay for it if I clicked on the shows. So I'd sort of scroll through and I'm like, oh, okay. But someone set me straight and told me that's a great place to go to find lots of creatives. And once I found it, it was great because it just broke up that commute. I found shows that would have, 15 to 20 minute episodes, and, it took away a lot of that, just how not bored I would get of audiobooks, but, it just would break it up.
Yeah, I was actually going to go to that because I've got it on my notes about audiobooks. So, audiobooks, sometimes they're a bit like you said, one person just speaking and telling the story and everything. And so, were you inspired by that to create your own show then? Is it sort of along those lines? In a sense, it's like an audio short story, but with sound effects and voices, and he's taking that to the next level.
Yeah. So audiobooks has always been the thing that I've been into. And just as a kid, I would listen to heaps, as well as reading. But yeah, audiobooks, especially ones that would add little effects and everything and little bits of music, and that just, I felt, took it to the next level. But when I first started listening to podcasts, there was one in particular called The Other Stories. And it's a bunch of English guys, and they started it as a sort of an experiment they would just write these short stories and narrate them. And that's sort of how they started. And I just found it great. Like they would have, their own sort of, it was straight narration, but they would have some effects in there. And that was my biggest inspiration for the show. And I just devoured their show. They had, at that stage, I think they'd been going for 3.5 years or something like that. So they had a huge back catalogue, and I just teared through that. And that definitely inspired me. And I'm like, mate, like this is something maybe I want to do. And another reason for starting the show was to connect with other writers, because I've always wanted to be a writer and be a novelist. It's, it's the great dream of a writer to have a published novel. And just with, chasing the dollar, we get into careers that we might not necessarily want. So I was in I still am in quite a good job, but I felt that my creative side was lacking, and I just wasn't writing anymore. I wasn't really reading. So yeah, their show sort of, and others, but theirs particularly sort of inspired me. And I'm like, maybe this is something that I can do. Maybe this is how I can, find other writers, find other creatives, and, just get back into it. And yeah, it just evolved from there. And I just started playing around, but that was definitely my biggest inspiration.
That's cool. So you've got a history in story writing. Have you been published yet?
I have, yeah, just some short stories, some poetry. I've sort of only started submitting my own work over the past about 1.5 years now. I'm actually an editor for a magazine at my uni and stuff like that. So I've got fingers in many pies, and it all takes up a lot of time. So my writing is actually sort of lacking a bit at the moment, because I spend so much time on the show and just other, creative projects. But because I woke up at, 31 or 32, and I'm like, I really need to do something about this. If I'm serious about being creative, I need to do something now. And I wrote a short story at that point, and I put it in the drawer, and I read it back a couple of weeks later, and I'm like, this is really bad. It's been such a long time since I've written. And I'm like, I used to get a lot of compliments from my teachers and stuff when I was younger. And I'm like, maybe there's something I can do to help teach myself. And I don't know how I came across it, but yeah, there was a creative writing degree going on. And I'm like, yeah, why not go for it? So I've been doing that the past couple of years, and I've almost finished that. And I'd like to think that my writing skill has gone up since then. And I've been published a few times since then. So once I've finished my degree, it'll definitely give me more time for my writing. I've got a couple of novels that I'm writing at the moment. I've also got an audio drama, like a full cast audio drama that I'm writing at the moment, a horror one, which,
Wow.
I'm very excited about that. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of people to do it. So I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition, but it's definitely something I'm working on.
Well, that skips ahead to something I was going to get to actually later on.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Sorry.
It's okay. That's fine. It's fine. It's a natural conversation. So, because you've mentioned about doing the audio drama and the different voices, you've gone that way with your own show, where initially you started just as yourself, but you've started to integrate other people as well. So it's it's like a natural progression then, that you're going to go from that to doing this audio drama. So you're going to be utilising the same people in that.
It depends how long I take to write this thing. Some of the people that have gotten involved are very talented guys and girls like that, and they're just such lovely people. And I just came across it by accident. So the first season I narrated all of myself. I think my wife is featured in episode 2, but I think that's the only other person in the podcast in season 1. And, I would always listen back to my own episodes a few times and just try and find sort of the imperfections, what could be done better, take notes, all that sort of thing. And one thing I sort of found, I'm like, well, I'm sort of sick of hearing my own voice. So, and I know other podcasts use other narrators, and I was like, oh, how hard would that be to, sort of to organize, to have other people? And I was like, whatever. So I advertised on Instagram. I sent a post out there and got some bites from that. But there was actually one podcast that he had actually thrown out something similar, I think 3 weeks before. And he started a group of people for just voice actors, essentially, just trying to get exposure and stuff like that. So he added me to this group, and, there's a whole bunch of very generous people in there. And a lot of them have just, really taken these parts that I've written for my intros and even the narration for some of the episodes and really just go on with it. It's just, they're very talented people.
Very talented.
And I just think it really adds a lot of diversity. Adds a little bit of diversity to the podcast. My wife, for some reason, she doesn't like it too much, having all the other people, but I think it's a very good addition.
It's sort of it's similar to, when people read stories to the children and they make voices up. It's sort of an expansion of that, really.
Mm.
And
yeah, exactly. And I tried to do other voices, and I'm getting better slowly. When I first started, I recorded myself and listened back to myself. I'm like, man, that's really bad. So I do sometimes. It's makes me feel a little bit crazy sometimes, but I'll sit there with the microphone and just play around with voices and things like that, and just try and change it. And especially with my Australian accent, it's really, I don't know, I just find it really hard to do other voices, but it's good to have other people there, and these other people are just they come back to me with their recordings so quickly. It's just been great. And that's why with the second season, I don't know how much of the second season you've listened to, but I really tried to ramp up the story and the intros, just adding in a whole bunch of characters, adding in this sort of subplot before the actual, the stories of these authors. I'm adding in, so that's going to, come to a head. And one of my goals is to eventually just have one full episode of just this story. But yeah, I have a lot of fun writing those scripts, and it's good practice for the full audio drama that I'm writing at the moment.
You're not the only person that's doing this thing with the voices. I mean,
no.
I was talking to somebody, Darwin's Deviations. I don't know if you know that one.
No.
But he's I've been chatting with him online. He's a bit embarrassed because he's Bosnian, and he's from Bosnia. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I'm giving away. He likes the anonymity, but now I've just given that away. But he was saying that he makes up voices and characters because it makes him feel better doing the show that he does. I mean, it's a fascinating show. He talks about strange creatures, like blobby forms that are creatures, but people didn't know were, and insects and really weird.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about. It's almost like creatures that shouldn't exist, but they do.
All right, sounds interesting.
And he has the same thing where he has these different characters, and he'll go off and he'll start talking about it, and then suddenly one of the characters will pick him up on something and say, "Have you really?" And it's almost like breaking the fourth wall. That he does it with, because they'll say, "Have you actually researched this properly, or not?"
Yeah.
And then they'll, and he's got all these characters talking to him, and And he says that, it's weird in a way because technically he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
So it's something I've grabbed onto recently with your show and with his show, with this thing of people having different characters, like you've got different characters in your show. And I find that fascinating how you introduce your show that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into the story and you have a very good American accent, by the way.
Do I? I've had a couple of people say, "Oh, it's not very good," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I really tried hard with the most recent episode, the American accent. But no.
But then I'm a Brit, so what would I know?
Yeah, no, I've tried a British accent, and it's not very good. But yeah, I just keep working on those things in private,
So did you start reading from a really young age then and just got addicted to reading?
Oh, yeah, I did. My mum is a massive reader, and she just introduced me. I originally started as a massive fantasy fan. She introduced me to, J.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit. Like I was reading The Hobbit and Raymond Feist. Magician is it's really hard. Like there's so many books that I love, and I just always go back to that book, Raymond E. Feist, Magician. It was escapism at its finest when I was a young kid, and you just you want to be this little magician, like this little kid that grows up and becomes a magician. It was just amazing. But yeah, I started off as a fantasy fan, and then I got onto the horror stuff, like, R.L. Stein Goosebumps. Like I would devour them. Like, and then one day I had all of them. And one day my auntie read one of them while we're in the car because she was that bored. We're on a road trip or something. And she said to my mum, "Have you read one of these before?" And my mum's like, no. Like, why? She's like, "I don't know if it's suitable." And so I sort of got banned from reading them for a couple of months, and I hated it. I hated it so much. So, and I just begged my mum that much that she eventually just caved and gave them back to me, which was great. Because, but so that was my introduction to sort of the horror stuff, and from there I moved on to Christopher Pike and his Spooksville series, and then he had some young adult books, so I sort of grew up and read his stuff, and he has a whole, I think it's called The Last Vampire series, and then from there I moved to Anne Rice, and Anne Rice is just a whole nother thing. But yeah, and that's just how I really ran with horror, and just ever since then, and my grandmother showing me The Evil Dead at an age that was far too young, I've just been obsessed. As it goes with all the massive horror fans, there's always an instance where someone has shown them a movie when they've been way too young.
Yeah, I remember I watched The Evil Dead for the first time when I was about 13, I think. So
were you scared?
That was probably too young.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is about those films, I mean, you find it with all the Raimi films where there's a really great amount of humour thrown in there for good measure. He has so much humour in his films. They are.
Yeah.
And Bruce Campbell is the perfect actor for Sam Raimi to use in his 100%. Films as well.
But yeah, there's so much humor in it. But when I watched it as a young kid, it was the most terrifying thing, especially when my grandmother would tell me all these ghost stories and everything. So she'd tell me these ghost stories, show me these. She wasn't a very good influence, I suppose. But I'm just thinking that. Yeah, I think I was under 10 when I watched it, and yeah. But here I am, and I love it. All this stuff more than ever.
Yeah, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here and just say that it's interesting how, going out of storybooks but going into films, horror films, that you find certain directors who work with certain actors. So, like I said, you'll find Sam Raimi works with Bruce Campbell almost exclusively, and you find the same with John Carpenter. Back in the day, used to use Jamie Lee Curtis and Kurt Russell quite a lot as well.
Oh, Halloween. That is just a flawless movie. I love my horror movies too, by the way. And that is sort of like, I wanted to bring the atmosphere of cinema, to my podcast. And that's why maybe sometimes, I don't know, some people may say that I use a bit too much atmosphere, like the drones and the music. But I just love it. I love creating this whole atmosphere and layering the effects. But yeah, like I'm a massive cinema fan, and I wanted to, get into filmmaking, but I don't know, it seemed so hard. But writing was what I settled on, and I love it. But cinema, especially horror cinema, such a history there. Like you go on to any podcasting platform, and there are hundreds and thousands of people that just talk about horror films because it's enamors people.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a very much a theatricality to your show. I will say, with all the sound effects, and I don't know if you've read, but I think I've mentioned in my blog about listening to shows. I think I've mentioned in yours about the fact that I love the sound effects and the sort of eerie music in the background, and the voices that you put on to the characters, and I think it does exactly what you're wanting it to do, providing that almost cinematic feel to it.
Yeah, well, that was the one main difference that I wanted to have with my show. All the the narrated stories, podcasts, they sort of just, their whole thing is minimalism. We read it as it's intended and everything, but I wanted to just go sort of a bit larger than life with it, and try not to have it be too distracting. But a lot of people a lot of these podcasts would just go do minimal effects, like just a drone through the whole story or whatever. But I try to have shifting transitions with the music and the drones, but that was how I wanted to make, the Night's End unique. That coupled with the intro stories, because I think just adding that personality of Jimmy Horrors was, I think that really bolsters up the show a bit. Like in the first season, I wasn't spending as much time on those intros, and I really regret that. I wish I could go back and change it, but it's out there now. But that's with season 2, I really just pumped it up and just sort of had the Jimmy Horrors leading you, the listener, around and on this adventure through this haunted house and just meeting all these different characters. Yeah, I think it's definitely a progression that's worked really well.
Absolutely. What was I going to say? I was going to say as well, I'll bring this in now. I remember when me and you have both discussed before now online, we've both discussed the Roald Dahl thing with myself, where I was saying to you about a horror anthology series that he used to do in the 70s and the early 80s and it was in the UK called Tales of the Unexpected, and you were saying that you were a big fan of Roald Dahl yourself.
Yeah, so it's not something that I grew up with. Roald Dahl was something that I had sort of read some stuff later on, because getting back into writing, I'm just going back through sort of these great writers, and he's just always a name that's out there. But I have seen, I remember, actually before this, I think it was yesterday, I was like, I think I've watched that show, and I typed it into YouTube and found an episode and watched it. I was like, yeah, I do remember. My memory is horrible, but yes, I do remember watching that show when I was younger, and him sitting in the armchair, and I really love that.
He'd start to tell you the story.
Yeah, I love having that.
To go into it. Yeah.
That host that sort of guides you in. And I think I subconsciously took that, that's not a new idea at all. But I really like that concept of just having that host that sort of leads you through, and like the storyteller. Jim Henson's The Storyteller. Like, that was great as well.
Yeah.
You know, but my wife and I, we watch that at least once a year. Like, we'll chuck it on. And we recently watched the one that was about Greek myths, and it's not as good, but it's still pretty good.
Wow. So have you got 5 top, if you got 5 writers that are your favourite writers, would you say?
That's a very hard question, Marv. Yeah, look, I think I've mentioned a couple of them already. Like, Raymond Feist would probably be... It's really hard to pick my number one because I grew up with Raymond, and so he sort of, I feel like he's shaped the person that I am, because he's got so many books. He's got like 50-something books. And but that's a fantasy author, Stephen King now is probably my favorite author. Like, I sniff out all the hardcovers I can find, and I'm always on, Facebook Marketplace chasing them down. And in my office, I should have turned my camera on to show you. In my office behind me, I've got, a whole bookcase. I've got like 3 bookcases. One of them is just mostly Stephen King at the moment. I've actually got an artist friend of mine making me have you ever heard of Book Nooks? It's like a diorama that goes, he's making me a Stephen King inspired book nook, and he let me sort of help with the creative process. I can't wait for that. It's going to go in between some of my books. But yeah, Stephen King's definitely up there. Anne Rice, who I mentioned before. So sort of in my 20s, I was just in love with her characters. Like, it's the way that people explain it's like the saddest vampires around. And yeah, it just really, I don't know, it just really hit me, her characters like Lestat and all of them. But yeah, she's probably in my top 5. Bram Stoker has got to be there. These are all sort of cliche answers, aren't they? But they are the most influential. Like, I collect Dracula books. Whenever I see a copy that I don't have, I pick it up. So, and just the way that is written in, epistolary, like in letters, that was just, it blew my mind, the way that that's written and how it can just evoke still so many images. It's just very great writing. And Edgar Allan Poe, who was on your list that you sent me. Love Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
Mask of the Red Death is probably my favourite piece of his. Telltale Heart, Raven.
Also a good film.
Yeah. And so Edgar Allan Poe, just the way he writes, the images that he can evoke, just brilliant. So gothic. And so that's probably 5. There's so many more. My bookcases can attest to that. Like, I'm also a big fan of sci-fi as well, and so Ursula K. Le Guin, Philip K. Dick, But yeah, I'll stop rambling. But those are sort of my favourites.
I love reading Philip K. Dick because he's not the most, should we say? I'm not. He's more of an ideas writer than he is a big, long novelist, should we say.
That's it.
But his ideas are like nobody else's.
Oh, exactly.
It's fascinating to read. And then to see how filmmakers expand on that and make films out of it is just, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's not the best writer, but the ideas that he came up with, just crazy.
I think it's possible that maybe Philip K. Dick, his ideas were so frequent that he didn't really have the time to
flesh them out,
expand that much further. Perhaps his ideas were that quick that he just had to push them out because they were coming that quickly in his head that he just had to keep going and going and going, like almost like a conveyor belt of ideas.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I was like that.
Yeah. You and me both. So when you record your show then, when you do all the voices, do you do different takes? So you do the normal voice in one and then you do all the other voices as separate?
So I will. Yeah, I do the sort of intro separate. The narration I sort of try to get in one sitting. If there's different characters in there, I'll try and do it at the same point. So I'll, switch voices up there. But then when I'm going through that whole editing process of that narration, I'll listen to it and see if it interacts well. Because sometimes it can just seem a bit wooden and forced. So then I'll just re-record certain lines that need to be done. But yeah, that's usually how I do it. When I get other guys to do it, literally just get all their files, chuck them all in, and slowly start from the start of the story and just cut them together. Very time-consuming process.
And the music that you've got in the background and all the sound effects,
Mm-hmm.
are they yourself, or have you found them from places?
I wish I had the time. 100%. I wish I had the time. I actually bought a keyboard. My wife yelled at me for buying it because it was very expensive. Because so I wanted to do my own sort of drones and stuff like that and put my own music into it. But it would literally, because I'm on a weekly release schedule, there's no way that I could write the music in that time. But there's plenty of sites out there that you pay a licensing fee and you can use their music and sound effects and stuff like that. So I utilize them. They got hundreds of thousands of effects.
So you don't do your own Foley work or anything?
I do some Foley work. Like if I need something specific, I do have a field recorder that's I'll go out and get specific effects. But overall, the music and the drones and stuff like that, that's all I license them. But yeah, a lot of the Foley stuff I do. Like time permitting, obviously, but yeah.
So how do you choose the stories then to read? Because I mean, initially the first story I believe was one of your own, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So I put out a call for submissions, and I just left it open, which was a silly idea on my behalf, but I left it open the whole time during the whole of season 1 and even 5 episodes in for season 2. I just had submissions coming in and in and in. So yeah, that's obviously a whole nother process with this, like the slush pile is what everyone calls it, and just reading all the stories and just really trying to find the ones that that might have sort of a different idea, something that just really just captures your attention. Or I try and find stories where the characters just really shine. But yeah, it takes a while because you get hundreds of stories sent to you, and I'm so grateful for that people trust me to take their blood, sweat and tears that they've put into this piece of work and make it into into this audio format. I feel so privileged, and that's why I read every single story, and unfortunately I can't give any feedback to a lot of them. Sometimes there has been instances where someone has written a story and I really just, I don't know, I vibe with that writer, their style of writing, but the story just didn't work. And there's been a few that I've gone back to them and say, hey, look, I really love your writing style, but I don't think this story would suit the podcast. Do you have anything else? And they've come back with another story and that suited really well. So yeah, that's sort of the process though, lots of reading.
So have you built up relationships then with these writers and friendships?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I love is when they come back and they've listened to the episode, and they're like, I forgot that this was my story while I was listening to it. That to me is like, yep, job well done, But a lot of these writers have just been, I've built some good relationships, and that was part of the reason I started this in the first place, to get into the industry, meet some people all around the world, just sort of meet some people that potentially, I can riff off and find some contacts that we can potentially switch stories and give each other feedback. And it's really hard to find good feedback on your writing these days. So, but yeah, I've definitely made some really good relationships with some people.
It's always great when you make friendships with people and you get that back and forth rapport with each other. It's
Yeah. Like I moved out into the country in the state that I live in Australia. Like I moved out to the country. So there's not really I've got one little street, it's got a tiny little, wouldn't even call it a supermarket. It's just a little market, So I don't really know anyone around here. One of my friends live on the other far side of the city. So it's not like I go out or anything. So just having, these people, and especially all around the world that, you talk to, and you just meet so many interesting people. Like even your podcast, I've been listening to it. It's just,
wow, thank you.
Just the way you talk to these people, and it's great. I love it. And even my interactions with you.
Well, I'm trying to be respectful of people. It's why, how I've said to yourself and I've said to other people how I will always make sure that I check out people's shows a good number of times before, because it's almost presumptuous expecting people to just say, yeah, I'll be on your show without you. I'd feel bad just saying to them. I'd feel bad asking them without listening to them first and doing my homework, shall we say.
Yeah. No, you've definitely, you'll tag me when you're listening to the show. You're really ripping through the episodes. That's for sure.
I'm trying to turn people onto these shows basically, and saying to people, I'm listening to this. It might be right up your street, because I think a friend of mine who's a horror writer, he also listens to your show, but I'm not sure whether he listens to it because I was listening to it or whether he already was. Luke.
Yep. It's been great.
Because he actually tagged you, didn't he? I think before I tagged you in the post, he tagged you first. I think he tagged you in the Instagram post as a response to me posting about listening to you.
Oh, did he?
And he did it before I tagged you.
Right.
So there you go. But it's weird that actually, where you'll do you look at where people listen to your show from?
Yeah, some of these places that you can host your podcast, some of them have really bad stats and just aren't very good, and sometimes you got to pay for a bit more. But yeah, mine has a map. It's got a map of the world and shows me all the countries. I don't know how many countries that I've been listened to in, but there's quite a few. It surprises me. A large majority of them are from America, and then obviously I've got probably the next biggest is Australia, because me telling my friends they better listen to my podcast or else. But so the next biggest one is Australia. But some of the remotest places, what was one of them? Like Venezuela. It's just amazing how far, my little podcast, I spend hours in the dark in my room making up these voices and, telling these stories, and it just can go to every corner of the globe and, entertain people. It's great. It's a good feeling.
It is. So what do you actually record the show with then, and then edit it with? What do you use?
What gear?
What gear? And software, etc.
A lot of sound producers will probably curse my name when they hear me say this, but I've got a Yeti, a Blue Yeti X, that I use. That's it's a good introductory one. It's good. I find it does the job for narration work. If I was to do, say, a podcast like yours, where it's interview and stuff like that, I don't think it would be suitable. But yeah, really, it picks up. It's got multi-functions on it and everything, so I can use it. It is it's versatile, and it does the job really well. I'm thinking of getting a Shure mic soon, but that's like $800 Australian, which is, it's a
Yeah.
decent outlay. Don't mind the fact that I spent, $1,600 on a keyboard, but so that's what I use for my microphone, and I use Adobe Audition to edit. That's just the first. Like, I was doing some video work for uni, and I had access to Premiere Pro, and I had the whole suite on my computer, and then I just started playing around with Audition and just use that. So now I'm really used to that. When I first started to do things, it just took me so long. It's just one of those things. Like, what program do you use?
I use, ironically, I use a piece of software called Reaper.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. People really recommend Reaper. Over Adobe Audition, because everyone's like, Adobe Audition's really expensive and it always crashes and stuff like that, but I've never had trouble with it crashing, and it's just what I'm used to.
No.
But Reaper, I should check it out. But yeah, that's what I use for that.
Aptly named as well.
Yes. But that's pretty much all I have gear wise. Like, I've got a pop filter and my boom arm, but that's pretty much it. And obviously my laptop. But it's amazing what you can do with just a couple of things. And the production quality, I didn't think I was going to get very good production quality. Like, I don't sound treat my room at all.
No.
Maybe the books absorb some of the sound. I don't know, but it turns out pretty good.
So do you use any effects on your voice to make some of the voices, or is that just...
I do definitely.
Yeah.
I use some compression, and I just literally I YouTubed how to make my voice sound better. And there's this guy, his name's what's his name? Dave Russell, I think, on YouTube. He's been doing Adobe Audition stuff for years and years and years. And anything you type into YouTube and type Audition, his face will pop up. And I just followed some of his tutorials, and he's taught me everything I know for free. It's been great. I've just had to be patient.
That guy could make so much money if he wanted.
Well, yeah, he's got a class and everything, but I'm a cheapskate. I'll just take his free videos, thanks.
Won't we all? Don't know what I was going to say. So when you write stories, then do you have a set way to write stories, or do you just let the inspiration come to you?
That's a great question. I'm not a pantser, which is, I don't know if you know what a pantser is. Just essentially just vomit on the keyboard, essentially just get the idea out on the paper. That's not usually my deal. I usually like to plan everything out. One main piece of feedback I get from my teachers is that you really seem to know what you're trying to write. Like, you really know what you're writing, and that's because I plan and plan and plan. A lot of people say that takes the creativity out of it, like the love of it out of it, but that's how I prefer to do it. It's definitely not the way Stephen King does it. He definitely just sits there and writes it and lets the muse tell the story. But I do like to plan. If I'm writing some short stories, though, sometimes I'll have a basic idea and I won't know where it's going. But mostly, if it's something a bit longer, like if it's like a 6,000 word piece or something like that, I will. I've got this giant whiteboard that takes up like one whole wall in my office when I've got it in here. And I'll just write out dot points of, who dies, who lives, like where the story's going to go. And that's usually how I do my longer pieces.
Yeah, it's like your storyboard, in much as my that I sent to you is my bullet points are their points that you have to hit in that story, but everything around those bullet points is extra and made up there on the spot, which is where the creativity comes from.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep. Yeah, I don't like Stephen King. The way that his stories end up. It's like, how was that not planned? You know, like
Yeah.
it's just magic. And Neil Gaiman, he says it. I saw it. What did he say? He's like, you know, your editing, your second edit is where the magic happens, because you make the reader feel like you knew what you were doing the whole time, and it's it's brilliant. I love it.
But there's a lot of writers like that. I mean, I don't think that Terry Pratchett used to plan any of his writing. I don't think. I think he just used to sit down and write, and that was it.
Yep.
A lot
it's
of these,
amazing.
A lot of these people, they just write and write and write, and there's so many books out there by them as well, and they're making them up on the spot, and you think, how have they been able to do that?
Yeah, and just maintain so many different story arcs through these books, and I've never tried it, like a longer piece. I've never tried to just sit there and write it from A to Z. Like maybe that can be a challenge for me this year. Write a longer form piece and just not plan anything and see how it goes. Because look, some of the greatest writers out there do it. Well, a lot of them do, you know. So they must be doing something right.
Well, Stephen King does that a lot. He challenges himself, because The Green Mile was a challenge, wasn't it? Wasn't that sort of like he released it? He wrote it in parts that he put out or something per each month, or
it was. Yeah. It was in a journal or something like that. It was just a short. Yeah, he broke it up into multiple pieces. That's right.
But before he started that, he didn't know what actually it was going to be about or anything. He just made it up, and then so he wrote the first part, put that out. Then he wrote the second part, put that out the next month, but he never knew from the beginning any of those points that he'd hit during all those parts, and it's just. How did he make something that's so together as a piece? How did he do that?
Yeah,
in that way,
it amazes me.
It
amazes me.
Bewildering.
He's very much for that, like just writing it. Characters go where they want to go. You know, he always. Because I love having a notepad, and so many writers love having a notepad, and they can write down, you know, if they're out on the run, they can write down a little quick idea or whatever. But Stephen King says that having a notepad as a writer is a good way to immortalize bad ideas. It just shows every writer's different, you know, like. But yeah, I love having a notepad, because you should see some of these notepads are just. I'll put a notepad next to the bed, and I will wake up in the middle of the night, and you know, it's the hardest thing, trying to write down an idea while you're half asleep. And more often than not, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll go to read it, and I'm like, what is this? I can't even, it's not even decipherable half the time. But I try so hard to get these ideas out. Because you know, you're dreaming, you have the best ideas, and sometimes you'll have a dream and it's like, oh, this is a great idea. Like, you wake up, you write it down, and the next morning you read it and you're like, what? A story about you walk down to the shop and, you know, bought a drink. Like, there's nothing good about this, but the dream was amazing, you know. But
Well, I keep a dream journal, actually. So if I wake up and I remember a dream, I will write it out in that book. So
I wish I did that. I wish I did that. But, dreams are crazy. There's got to be more meaning behind them, you know.
But I'm one of those who has a notebook everywhere as well, because I write songs. So I will have a notebook.
Oh, brilliant.
There's one at the side of the bed, on the bedside cabinet. There's one in the kitchen, one in the bedroom. I think I've even probably got one near the toilet, I think, as well. And then I just write these sort of
like...
your
best thinking on the toilet.
So they say. But so sometimes I might suddenly get an idea and think, oh, what about that? And then I'll write that down. And then, but then you have to try and go back to these things and think, okay, that's good. Where do I go from there? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But, so what other podcasts do you actually listen to, Jimmy?
So I'm a massive fan of audio dramas. So I am listening to what's the name of the company? Why is it evading my brain right now? I can't think of it. The podcast that they do, like their one of their most recent one is Baraska, which is based on someone's story, but they made it into a full cast audio drama. That's great. What else am I listening to? All these guys that have been doing these voices for me, I'm listening to all of their podcasts, and I never used to be into that much into the paranormal stuff, because a lot of these guys do have all these paranormal podcasts, but I'm just finding it so interesting. It's like Xander and Stone podcasts.
Yep.
Xander is great. He voices the butler for me. He's got actually this week, which he's doing some narration for me, like a whole story. But yeah, his voice is intoxicating as the butler. Yeah, terrifyingly evil.
Well, he's a professional voiceover. He's done voiceover work professionally before, hasn't he?
Yeah. I was so blessed that he was willing to be a recurring character.
But, I was saying Jenna Stone has as well. She's done voiceover work professionally as well.
Oh, has she? I didn't know that. But yeah, their show is good. They work well together. They riff off each other really well.
Other shows as well, because you listen to other story shows as well, aren't you? I think.
Yeah, so the other stories is a big one. Tales to Terrify is a great short story podcast that I listen to. I'm actually doing some recording for a story for them soon. I've done some voiceover work for the other stories as well, and it made my day. It made my day that when because I sort of approached them as this little podcast, and I'm like, hey guys, you inspired me to start my own, and I was wondering if we could, like if potentially, maybe I could do some voiceover for you. And yeah, they've sort of taken me on as a narrator, and I've done a couple of episodes for them now. So, and they're really helping push my show out there as well. They've given me some call outs on their show, and it's really boosted my numbers a lot. I'm really appreciative of them. No Sleep podcast is a no-brainer. That's probably one of the longest running horror podcasts out there, and I didn't like it at first, but I'm really getting into it these days, and they just have so much material there. There's so much back catalogue that I'm just trying to get through it. It's just too much. But yeah, what else? There's so many podcasts out there.
There are. I was saying to somebody when
you listen to a lot.
I do. It stops me from being bored at work.
So do you work night shift or something?
I work night shifts, yep. I drive around in a van checking sites and doing alarm response, and while I'm driving I listen to other people's podcasts.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, my brother-in-law's a copper, policeman. Yeah, he loves it. He loves listening to my podcast when he's like in the car, just, sitting there on a stakeout or something. But yeah, another podcast that I listen to is Tiny Tales. I actually, through the person that wrote Circle Route, which is episode 2 of season 1, Jamie Munro, he got me in touch with R.E. Rule. She's an author, and she has a podcast where her and a nice gentleman have their own podcast, and he actually does all his own music. It baffles me. Like they're both so talented. She's an amazing writer, and so she'll write a story and do the narration, and then he'll just add this writing underneath, music underneath it. It's amazing. Kudos to them, because I wish I could do it. I'm jealous of their talent.
I think you do a really great job personally. I think it's a great show.
I appreciate that.
I obviously enjoy it because I'm always listening to it.
Yeah, exactly. You're still listening.
I am still listening. I'm going to carry on listening and get up to date and keep listening. It's my necessary
I
listening
can't
now.
wait
that
for
is.
you to. Oh, great. Thank you. I can't wait for you to get to season 2 because I'm really proud of the story that I'm putting behind it. Because I feel like in the first season, because there's so many episodes, just sort of those intros became a bit same, but I try to mix it up a lot in season 2. And yeah, I can't wait for you to get to there.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to keep going, like I said. So, what advice would you give to people starting their own podcast for the first time?
I don't feel qualified to give advice. Well, one of the main things for me when I wanted to start something, because I wanted to start something for like a year, but I was sort of too scared to for a time, and sort of like how, because I could write, but sound production, all that sort of thing was just foreign to me. But some of the main things I did was just obviously listen to a lot of podcasts in a similar style that you want to. Take notes, like see what you like about them, see what sounds good, what you can essentially pillage and steal, how not their material, but just the styles and everything like that. But then you go after that, you take all that information away and like, okay, I've sort of got the basis of what I want. And then you just got to try and find a way to make it your own and make it a little bit unique, because it's really hard to stand out in the podcasting world. And with COVID coming down, like the growth of podcasting is exponentially growing. Like it's already a growing thing. And yeah, with COVID, everybody had this spare time, and there's just so many new podcasts out there. It's great. It's been great for all of it. But yeah, that's probably one of the main things. Like, try and find a thing that'll make you unique, and always listen to other shows. Always try and make it better. Make sure you've got a passion for it, because when it becomes work, you've really got to have a passion for it. It takes a long time to find any sort of traction with your podcast, especially, and it can be so deflating at first, Yeah, at first you'll release an episode. I'm like, yes, I've got 10 people that listen to my podcast. That's amazing. But you release 10 episodes or something, and you're like, yes, I've got 10 people listening to my podcast. It can get quite deflating at times, but as long as you're enjoying it and it's giving something back to you, it's like getting your creative side out there. I think those are the people that really push through and get success, because you can really see passion in someone's podcast.
Absolutely. Anyway, Jimmy, where can people find you and where can people get hold of you?
People can find us at www.nightsendpodcast.com. On there is pretty much everything. If anyone wants to submit, we have different sorts of submissions going on there. There's competitions. Even recently started a horror-themed clothing called Stay Horrific, and that's all on the website as well, if people want to check that out. On Instagram, it's at Nights End Podcasts, and that's sort of our main social media. Or if they want to maybe follow me and my personal writing journey, because that's only sort of just starting, and they can get me at Jimmy Horrors on Insta and Twitter.
Cool. Right. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Thanks for talking with me today.
Thanks, Marv.
Thank you very much.
Speak to you later. Bye.
Thanks. And thank you, everybody, for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hi. Sorry, this is a new headset that I haven't used before, so How you doing, Marv?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I thought you were going to go into the Jimmy Horror's voice then. Jimmy. It's strange, because you talk to these people and they're like, you listen to the shows and then you're talking to them and it's like, it's
sounds
really
so
strange.
different.
It is, yeah. But also,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're taking part in their show or you're, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's when I first started the podcasts, my voice, I hated it. And just, as you edit your voice over hours and hours, you just get used to it and you end up liking your own voice.
Yes, yeah. It's a bit like, what's it, Complex, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So, how's things over there? So you've basically eradicated COVID altogether over there, then?
It seems that way. Like, there's still cases in the country, obviously, but I think the government's just come out today and said, "Yep, we're lifting all restrictions from going back to work." So much to everyone's dismay, people aren't going to be able to work from home as much anymore. And I really would have thought that a lot of businesses would have taken stock in the fact that, people have been just as productive at home, but my company certainly hasn't, the one that I work for. And they're pretty much saying, "No, everyone back to work."
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, the thing is, they've realised, or they should have realised, that they can work or have a lot of their staff work from home, so they could actually utilise that for the future, but they obviously don't seem to be doing.
Oh, 100%. You could, lower your overheads with your buildings and all of that sort of thing. Yeah. Companies just don't trust their staff a lot of the time.
But then again, they had that one of the shows I was doing outside of the show. We were talking, and they were saying about there was a Zoom meeting or something, a conference, and the conference wasn't due to start on Zoom for about 10-15 minutes, and this guy had not realised that he'd connected to the meeting already, so he sort of got bored, and on a computer at the side he was watching porn.
Oh no!
And he got carried away with the porn, shall we say? And he was on camera getting carried away.
Like, Jesus. Oh, that's terrible. Like, come on, man. Like, you put yourself in a meeting. Like, that's talking about getting way too comfortable. Like, did he forget that he had put himself in the work meeting? I
think so. Yeah. But all the others could actually see him on the camera. You see on the feed.
Yeah. Oh God. The cat one's pretty good. The Court. Have you seen it?
No.
I'm Not a Cat.
No, I've not seen that. No.
Oh, you have to watch it. It's a court case over Zoom. Yeah, and there's a barrister or a lawyer or something. He's somehow managed to put a cat filter on himself, so he looked like a cat. And the judge is like, "Sorry, but you've got a cat filter on," and it's just real awkward, and like the eyes of this cat just darting around because he's like, "Yes, my assistant's trying to turn it off. Like, we don't know how this has happened," and he's like, "I'm not a cat," and he's like, the judge is like, "Yep, I can see that. I can see you're not a cat." It's the funniest thing. I'm surprised you haven't seen it. It's like the new viral thing at the moment.
But we wouldn't be able to do these sort of shows without that technology, would we? Suppose.
Exactly right. Yes. And me working from home I've been able to create this show. Like, it's given me the extra time.
So is it going to cause trouble for you now then, having to go back to work? Is that going to make it more difficult to do the show?
I think it will. I've actually been given a bit of a promotion too, like covering for another person, and so. But no, look, I'll make the time. Like, I've got quite a few episodes in reserve, and I'm taking a larger break than I did between season 1 and season 2 this time, because I only took like 4 weeks, I think, and then went straight back into it. So I've had like 43 episodes or 42 episodes in 46 weeks or something like that. It's just been crazy. Very fun, but a lot of work. And I can only imagine how long it takes other podcasts to create. Like mine only go between 10 to 25 minutes. Yeah, usually it's around the 15-minute mark. And the amount of work I put into each show, and just the amount of time, like just how much time it takes. I can only imagine people that have hour-long shows and stuff like that. It just baffles me how people find the time. I suppose a lot of those shows, they have a team of people, whereas it's just me here.
Yep, same here. But we'll get into that in the main body of the show. So
Yeah.
we'll go into that. Did you? I did send you the notes, didn't I, for you to look at?
Yeah. I've written out some notes. Just some cues for myself.
With my incredibly bad artwork.
Nah, it's good. I liked it. I like the little River Styx picture.
Yep. And that's supposed to be an oar in his hand in the water.
Mm. Yeah, it was a bit dubious what that was.
Oh, yeah, it could be something else.
Maybe he was on a Zoom meeting for work.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. This is going in the post-show.
For sure.
Then I thought I'd do a list of people who are like famous writers in the horror genre as well on the side. I don't know why I did that, but
Yeah, I did see that. A lot of my favourites are in there.
that's cool. We'll get into that. So let's get started then. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So, was there anything that we need to pick up on, Jimmy, or do you think we've got all the points and everything?
No, I think that's it. You went the advice, listening.
It's all about, introducing everybody to your show so that they know what.
Yeah, you covered everything in that. Yeah. Well, I rambled on a bit. It was a good chat, though.
It was lovely talking with you. Great.
All right, Marv, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy.
And I'll be in touch with you, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. You take care.
Thanks very much.
Stay safe. Take care.
Bye.
Mate. Bye.
You too.